OCD doesn't just bring intrusive thoughts and uncomfortable feelings. It brings this demand. Make it stop. Make it feel right. Get back to normal right now. And that's the trap, because the more you try to control your thoughts, your feelings, or your bodily sensations, the more important your brain actually decides they are. So in this episode, I want to explain why control makes OCD worse, what control looks like in disguise, and the shift that actually starts to loosen OCD's grip. OCD sounds like I shouldn't feel like this, or I need certainty, or I have to get rid of this before I can move on with my day. These, unfortunately, are limiting beliefs that can really keep you stuck in the cycle of OCD. When I was really struggling, I was finding it so difficult to experience the level of anxiety that I always seem to have. Certain thoughts would come up and they would be so intolerable, so awful, so horrible that I felt I have to think about this. I have to have more certainty about it, because if I don't, then I'm a bad person in some way, or something terrible might happen. And of course that was causing my anxiety to get higher and higher, and then I would start resisting that anxiety. And unfortunately, what you fight with, what you try to hold down, it just tends to come back even stronger. And this was happening with me all the time. I was really looking for control, demanding that I shouldn't feel this way, that I should be happy all the time. But unfortunately, life has a different idea. Life does give us, at times, very difficult emotions. It does make things quite uncertain. And, it kind of says to us, hey, this is just how it is and you've got to get on with it. And I think our response sometimes as people who struggle with OCD is to say no to life. No, actually, I don't want to live with that uncertainty. I need to have, more certainty before I'm willing to move on. But the issue is with taking that kind of approach is we're going against reality. At times things will be difficult. There will be difficult things coming up. We will feel bad. But it doesn't mean that we're going to feel bad forever. It just means it's a passing weather system. Emotions are very much like clouds in the sky. They're moving through the sky, but up above those clouds, the sun is always shining. And if we wait long enough, the clouds will begin to part of their own accord because of the wind, because of the pressure. And the same thing happens internally with our emotions. If we are more patient with ourselves, when we're experiencing these difficult things, if we can tell ourselves that this thing is going to pass. It's true, I really don't like it right now. I really do want some more certainty. But you know what? I can tolerate not knowing 100%. I can allow this anxiety to be there. And as you start practicing that and proving to yourself the reality of that, which is you really can deal with these things, it starts to give you much more confidence in yourself. And I think so much of what we struggle with OCD is that it steals our confidence, our belief that we can tolerate these things. And as you start to prove to yourself that you really can tolerate things, your confidence starts to come back. I think it was actually always there, but sometimes it gets hidden by, all of that rumination, all of that looking for certainty, which really does feel, so horrible at times, and it takes that confidence away. One of the big reasons for why control makes OCD worse is actually quite simple. When you try to remove a thought or a feeling, you teach your brain it's dangerous. Your nervous system learns that this can't be here, and it starts scanning harder, checking more, and firing more alarm systems to actually protect you. And that's why people can spend years trying to feel calm and certain and end up feeling anything but. It's not that you're weak. You've actually just been training the alarm system by mistake. The more that you look for that certainty, the more that you tell yourself, I can't cope until, I've thought about it, or I've ruminated on it enough, or I've spent enough time thinking about it. Only then am I willing to actually put it down. Unfortunately, when we take that kind of approach, we're teaching our nervous system that actually, this thing really is bad because we had to ruminate on it. And therefore, when when similar things like that come up again in the future, well, the only thing that's going to help us to feel better is to ruminate. And of course, that creates the trap of OCD. That creates the OCD cycle. The second reason control makes OCD worse is the should problem. I should feel better. I shouldn't be thinking like this. I should be over this by now. And those shoulds turn your inner life into a rigid rule book. But real life doesn't follow those rules. Thoughts are messy, feelings fluctuate, bodies do weird things. And when you demand that your internal experience behaves perfectly, you end up fighting reality all day long. And that constant fight is exhausting, and it keeps OCD in the forefront of your mind. If you can, try to call out those shoulds as fuel for the OCD. Whenever you recognize that you're doing them, because sometimes it can be so habitual that we tell ourselves these shoulds, it can be very difficult to kind of spot them. But whenever you do, just remind yourself, there's one of those toxic shoulds. Actually, I do not want to pour more fuel on the fire of the OCD, so I'm going to put that down. Some people find it helpful to actually, write down what are their should statements that they most commonly use. And, I often say to people, the easiest way to write things down if you're going to journal is just to use the notes section of your phone as you go through your day. If you notice that you're really getting caught up in something, note that down in your phone. After a kind of a week or so, you're going to have, the majority of those typical should statements that you use. And therefore, when you find yourself doing them, it's going to be that much easier to kind of spot. And remember, what does OCD want? Well, it wants you to kind of have this idea that I have to live life perfectly. I have to feel a certain kind of way all the time. But that isn't realistic. That's very unself-compassionate. Really, what we have to learn to do is to accept life as it is. That there are going to be difficult things coming up sometimes. And actually, we can live well. We can live in line with our values and our goals. We can still be content and happy, even with things that are not kind of perfect there in the background. When we start living life in that way, that's when OCD, it can't really exist in the same way anymore. OCD thrives when we say, no, it should be like this or it should be like that. Once you pull that out from underneath, once you pull that out from underneath and you say, I'm not going to live in that way anymore. I'm going to allow more imperfection. And I'm actually going to thrive, even though those things are there. You're really beginning that process then of taking back that control from the OCD. And if you're struggling, I do have a free starter course to help you to break free from OCD. There's a link in the description. The third reason control makes OCD worse is that control quickly becomes compulsions, especially mental ones. Rumination is control. Analyzing is control. Reassurance-seeking is control. Checking how you feel is control. Trying to figure it all out is control. And it feels like you're solving something when you're doing this, but what you're really doing is feeding the loop of OCD and anxiety. You get something that pops up into your head, you want to figure it out, then you start performing compulsions. Temporarily, you feel a bit better, but because you had to do that compulsion in order to feel better, then you're just going to do more of those things in the future. Obsessively thinking about something and ruminating can feel productive at times. It can feel like at least you're doing something about the problem. You're not just allowing that uncertainty to be. But unfortunately, all it's really doing in the long term is pouring petrol on the fire of OCD. If we seek short-term relief, which is what we're doing when we're doing all of this thinking, when we're trying to control by having certainty, we're playing a short-term game. And if we play a short-term game, we're going to stay stuck in the OCD cycle. What it involves to break out is learning how to say, I'm going to play more of a medium to long-term game. Right now, I'm not feeling, 100%. There's some uncertainty here. There's something that I really want to ruminate on, but I'm not going to. I'm going to allow that uncertainty a little bit more. I'm going to come back to the present and do my best to refocus on other things. The imperfection of feeling this way can be here. when you do that for 10, 15 minutes, which is already the medium term, often we do begin to feel better because we're not controlling so much anymore and we're allowing things to just be. And when we do that, well, often we begin to calm down. The alternative is to stop trying to control what shows up and start controlling how you respond to things. And that's the whole game. Content control is I must not think this or feel this. Response control is I can't control what arrives, but I can choose what I do next. And when you practice response control, you step out of the tug of war with OCD. Thoughts can shout, feelings can surge, sensations can be there, and you can still live your life. If you can, I suggest coming up with one line that you say to yourself in these situations, like, I'm not going to fix this right now. Or if I really want to think about this later, but for the next half an hour, I'm not going to think about it. Try to remind yourself that real freedom is not about not feeling Try to remind yourself that real freedom is not about never feeling difficult emotions. It's about moving forward in your life, even with the discomfort present there sometimes in the background. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be there forever. I think that is one of the fears that people with OCD have. It's certainly something I struggled with for a long time. By taking that more medium and long-term approach, you're not saying that this discomfort, that uncertainty, that fear is always going to be there. You're just saying that right now it is here and I'm going to get on anyway, because when I do, well, often then I actually begin to kind of forget about it, because you're giving the nervous system an opportunity to begin to actually settle down. When we're constantly looking for the certainty, for the fix, to take the short-term perspective, we're just aggravating the nervous system. We're not giving it a chance to settle. It's really about a kind of snow globe. If you think of a snow globe, obviously if you're shaking that, you can't see the picture. But if you just settle that snow globe down on a table, then of course the snow is going to fall, it's going to settle down, and you're going to be able to see that picture with crystal clarity. And, that's often what happens with OCD. It's so frustrating. You can be so stuck in something and then you just decide to just leave it because you're exhausted from thinking about it. And when you do, everything just settles and suddenly you realize I didn't need to be worrying about that. But it's so much more clear, and it's because you've allowed your nervous system a bit of space, which allows it to actually calm and settle. So here's the practical drill for today. Notice the urge to control, label it control mode, and allow a small amount of discomfort on purpose, even 10% more than you would do normally, and then do the next valued action in front of you. Keep walking, keep speaking, keep eating, finish the task at hand, go and be with a parent, a partner, a friend, a human, walk the dog, whatever it might be. Over time, small choices like this really begin to retrain the brain. It's demonstrating that discomfort can be there in the background, but we don't need to do compulsions to get rid of it. Instead, we can choose to focus on the things in our lives that we really care about, our values, our goals, the things where we want to put our energy. OCD is so horrible because it steals our energy from us. There's things in our lives that we really do care about, that we want to be focused on. But, when we're stuck in our heads and we're over-evaluating, we're trying to control things all the time, of course, we get taken away from those things. And, that's so horrible when that happens. And if we can keep in mind that actually, we can choose our response. We get to choose where we put our attention. It doesn't matter what OCD throws at us, what types of thoughts or different situations that might come up, difficult emotions that might come up. We can always choose how we respond. And, that's very important. If we didn't have that, then we really would be stuck with OCD. And, in my experience, with all the work that I've done with hundreds of people, with my own personal story with OCD, we're not stuck at all. We really are empowered, but we have to prove that to ourselves. So I really hope that you enjoyed that. And if you are struggling with OCD and anxiety, I do have a 12-week program to help you to break free. If you're interested in applying for that, you can head over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com, and book in there for a free discovery call. There's a link in the show notes. I also have a free starter course. There's also a link in the show notes about that. And I really hope that you enjoyed. If you have any questions at all, do please let me know, and I will see you next time. This video is for education only. It's not therapy or medical advice. If you're struggling, please speak with a licensed mental health professional.